Hi, Shalom. Have you ever experienced that sensation of just not being ready? I think everyone has, and actually experienced it more than once. I know people that for years they would like to get married. They're just not ready yet. There are other people that are ready, that would love to break out and start a new business and take a risk, but they're just not ready yet. They need another little bit of time. And for those that would like to perhaps travel or do something different or challenge themselves, their desire is there, but just not ready. So this got me thinking, if the Mashiach were to come today, and I certainly hope he can, it's certainly more than a possibility, and in fact, it might even be called a probability, are we ready? Or would we say to the Mashiach, we've been expecting you a long time, but we're just simply not ready. Why don't you just go to the corner bar and hang out a little bit? Now, obviously, we wouldn't say that, but are we ready? Let me share with you a story. This story takes us back before the internet, before buses and cars, and certainly before planes. There was a time when people still traveled by horse and buggy, or horse and a wagon. And the equivalent of a personal chauffeur was a personal wagon driver, or in Hebrew we call him a Bal Agola, someone that drives the horses. So there was a wealthy person whose name was Baruch, and he had his own personal chauffeur, a Bal Agola, a coachman, whose name was Yaakov. The custom was that he would go on a 6-week business trip, and they would go to the same places, stay in the same hotels, and when there's no distractions, you get pretty close. So here he was, almost 3 years. Yaakov, the Bal Agala, Yaakov, the wagon driver, became rather intimate with Baruch, the one that he was driving with. He knew his foibles, he knew the way he spoke, and so on. In their travels, there were favorite haunts and places where they would stop. And there was one particular place, approximately 2 weeks into the journey, outside of the town, there was a beautiful, secluded lake. And very often, traveling in the heat with the dust and so on, Baruch would want to refresh himself. So he usually would ask Yaakov to stop, let the horses graze, and he would go to the lake, disrobe, and bathe. And he would come back refreshed, and then they would drive into the larger town where he would go to his usual hotel, and Yaakov would go to the hostel that catered to wagon drivers, and that had a special place for the horses. Anyway, Baruch goes to this place, disrobes, goes inside, splashes around, gets refreshed, and as he's leaving the lake, he stops because there is no clothing there. Now, this is a very uncomfortable position to be in, far from home without clothes. And neither is Yaakov. So he shouts, Yaakov! Yaakov! Yaakov, where are you? And he was for a moment very frightened that Yaakov had disappeared. But then he hears Yaakov respond, I'm not Yaakov, I'm Baruch. Yaakov, will you stop acting like an idiot? Give me back my clothes, and we're getting late. I'm not going to go to you unless you start calling me Baruch. Yaakov, Baruch is my name. Not anymore. You are Yaakov, and I am Baruch. Well, this rich man is not in any position to argue. Minus clothes means minus authority. Okay, Baruch, please come and bring me my clothes. To his horror, Yaakov comes dressed in the clothing of the rich man Baruch, and he deposits before him the clothing that the coachman used to wear. And he says, Yaakov, here are your clothing. And the true Baruch looks at the true Yaakov and he says, are you absolutely out of your mind? You know who's the boss and you know who you work for. He said, not anymore. Now you work for me. So you have a choice. Either you get dressed up as my coachman, or I will leave you here without clothes, and I will just go into the city, pass myself off as Baruch, and look for a new coachman. I'll say, my coachman got drunk, and I'm looking for a new one. And Baruch, the former employer, realized that this is not a joke anymore. Something got into Yaakov, and today we would call it identity theft, but in a true way. And he just put on the clothing, and he took all the accoutrements that a coachman, and he starts walking with Baruch, the new Baruch, to the coach. Baruch goes in, and he says to his former employer, you go outside, stay where the coachman stays, and you know by now how to get the horses, and that's your job. So the new Yaakov gets up, and he's smarting inside, furious, but realizes that he has to have a plan. Because actually, how is he going to prove to anyone that he's actually the true employer? And that the imposter is inside. The imposter knows so much of the way he speaks and the way he thinks. And business jargon, he could pass himself off easily as the true Baruch. Anyway, he comes into the town, and his former employee brazenly says, okay, coachman, Yaakov, take care of the horses. I'll be spending Shabbat over here. Sunday, we'll be going on our trip. And smarting with humiliation, he drops off the new Baruch at the hotel, and he goes to the hostel where all of the coachmen are hanging out, and he spends a miserable night in the company of rough and gruff and coarse people, and he's trying to figure out, how can I prove who I am? Friday morning, he went and he found out where the rabbi lived, who was a great Torah scholar. Unfortunately, I do not remember his name. This happens to be a true story. And he told him the whole story. He says, I am Baruch, I'm a businessman, I have a coachman whose name is Yaakov, I bathe, the man stole my clothing, he has my documents, he knows me well enough to speak with authority as if he knows my family, he'll tell you about my wife, my children, my business, but it's not me that's talking. Now I am talking to you. He is an imposter. The Rabbi was wise and saw right away that this man was speaking the truth, and asked him that on Shabbat, certainly the coachman, meaning himself, will sit with the coachman, and the imposter will sit with the dignitaries. He should please point them out who's who. Sure enough, on Friday night, the rabbi made eye contact with the true Baruch, who pointed out the false Baruch. And just by noticing how fidgety he was and how uncomfortable he was sitting with the rich people, he understood right away that he's actually an imposter. Well, that Shabbat passed, and the rabbi told the employer, what you should do is make a scene in the synagogue Saturday night. Accuse the man who's dressed like you, accuse him of being your balagolo. Accuse him of being your wagon driver. He, of course, indignantly will protest. And you get angry at him, shout at him, and he'll shout back, and then say, you know what, let's go to the rabbi tomorrow, and he certainly will say yes, because he has nothing to lose. And that's what happened. Saturday night, right after Havdalah, right after the separation of Shabbos, the former employer confronts his former employee, and he stages this big argument. You thief, you scoundrel, you stole my clothes, you stole my this, you stole my that. And of course, this fellow who's trying to act dignified seems very irate and says, what's wrong with you? Been drinking my coachman again? How many times are you going to allow your envy of my stature to overwhelm you? And he says, don't speak to me like that. And people were taking sides until finally he challenged him, let us go to the rabbi tomorrow. And his former employee said, fine, we'll do that. They show up at the rabbi's house at 9 o'clock in the morning. The rabbi had given very strict very, very strict instructions to the secretary. Let them come first, but bring them in the last. 10 o'clock passes, 11 o'clock passes. They're both fidgety. They're hungry. They're not comfortable. They go over to the secretary. When will the rabbi see us? We've been waiting here since the morning. And the secretary just says, well, I'm really very sorry. There's emergency after emergency. He's really very sorry. Please stay. Can you tell us when? No, he does not know when. By 1 o'clock, they were both not only irate, hungry, and uncomfortable, but they were like so bored, they began to sort of doze off. When they began to doze off, the secretary came in and said to the rabbi, I don't know what you want, but there are two guys out there waiting over 4 hours for you, and they're sort of sleeping. And the rabbi said, wonderful. And he says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to walk outside together. And I want you to shout, attention, the rabbi needs a coachman. That's all you have to do. So they walk out. The waiting room is still full. And these two fellows, Baruch and Yaakov, are sort of drowsy. And out comes the secretary. And he looks around the room and says, excuse me, we need a coachman. Is anyone a coachman over here? And immediately, the well-dressed man who was passing himself off as a rich man jumps up almost spontaneously. Coachman? Whenever he hears the word coachman, he jumps. As soon as he jumped up, everyone gasped. Why is this man dressed in his finery standing up? And the coachman, who's dressed like a coachman, is still sitting. As soon as everyone looked at him, he turned red with embarrassment, and the rabbi confronted him. You're a coachman, once a coachman, always a coachman. Confess. And of course, with some gentle persuasion, in front of all of these witnesses, the true identity theft was brought to the attention, and the right people exchanged clothing again. Now, this happens to be a true story, and I tell the story not only because to bring out the wisdom of the rabbi, as we say, where there is Torah, there is wisdom, but for a different reason. When a person is a coachman, even if you wear different clothing, you remain a coachman. And if a person is a very wealthy industrialist, even if he's wearing shorts and sneakers, he's still that person. Jewish people are God's people. We are the sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah, and Isaac and Rivka, and Yaakov and Rachel and Leah. And there's nobility, majesty, and greatness in each and every one of us. And now there's been a long time since we've been in the Holy Land of Israel. We've been called a lot of names, and our beautiful clothing has been taken away from us. And at times we get dressed like others. At times we look like schleppers. We look disheveled. We look dirty. We look uncouth. We look boorish. We look coarse. And then the Mashiach will come today. And I don't know how it's going to be, but perhaps we'll hear the sound of a chauffeur, and we're going to hear a sound. Sons of princes, get up. Nobility, arise. And you know who will be getting up? Me and you. Spontaneously. Children of Israel. And we're going to jump up. It was like, children of Israel. I haven't gone to synagogue for over 20 years. Yeah, that's true. Maybe sad, but it's only temporary. It's only a covering. Are we ready for Mashiach? The answer is unequivocally, yes, we are. What's the proof? Let him come. When he comes and he calls out, it has come the time of your redemption. It won't be people who are not Jewish that volunteer. They don't feel as if they're in exile. When he'll say, it is time to go back to the homeland, to Israel, to build a temple, it won't be people that come from Africa who are of the not Jewish faith. It will be Jews of the Jewish faith who, wherever they live, and whatever color skin or whatever color garments they're wearing, they will jump up. So friends, we are ready. Listen carefully today. Maybe we'll hear that cry. May it be God's will that today we hear it and we are ready to go back. Amen.